What if I told you that in the cold, hard world of big business, the most powerful asset isn't money or power or a brilliant strategy? What if I told you it's something most ruthless CEOs would laugh at? This is a story that challenges the very belief that you have to be cutthroat to get to the top. It's a real-life testament to the idea that kindness isn't a weakness, but a quiet superpower. This is the incredible, heart-aching story of how a baker's daughter has just 30 days to change a ruthless businessman's mind. And trust me, he was shocked by what happened next. Imagine a world filled with the warm scent of fresh bread, a place built on generations of love and community. That's the world of Paisley Roberts. Now picture the complete opposite, a cold, sterile empire of glass and steel, ruled by the brilliant but cold-hearted billionaire, Connor Purry, a man who sees the world as a chessboard and people as pawns. This story ignites when Connor, in a move of pure, ruthless business, decides Paisley's little bakery is nothing but a teardown, collateral for his next skyscraper, threatening to wipe her entire world off the map. It's a clash of universes, an impossible situation that forces Paisley to make the most audacious deal of her life. She gets one chance, a 30-day ultimatum, to prove to this man who has everything that the one thing he's missing is a heart. We're about to dive into a story filled with emotion, misunderstanding, and a journey of redemption that will keep you on the edge of your seat. You will witness firsthand how a simple baker's daughter orchestrates a plot twist so profound that it leaves a powerful billionaire questioning everything he thought he knew about wealth, worth, and the human heart. Get ready for an emotional roller coaster. Before we begin, I want to know where our story is reaching today. Please let me know in the comments what beautiful city you're watching from. And if you believe in the power of kindness, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories like this, and please share this with someone you know whose heart will be touched by this incredible tale. You ever get that feeling in the pit of your stomach? The one that tells you everything's about to change and probably not for the better. Well, for Paisley Roberts, that feeling wasn't just a hunch, it was a ticking clock. This incredible baker's daughter was staring down the barrel of an impossible ultimatum. She had a mere 30 days, a single month, to perform a miracle of sorts. A miracle that would involve a man who, by all accounts, didn't believe in them. The challenge wasn't just about business, it was deeply emotional and personal. It was about overcoming a force that seemed unstoppable, a man whose reputation preceded him. They called him a ruthless businessman, a titan of industry who saw the world in spreadsheets and profit margins, not people. Paisley's task was to make this billionaire see the heart in her family's legacy. It was a classic David and Goliath story, but with flour on David's apron. A real-life love story was the furthest thing from anyone's mind. Imagine the pressure, the weight on her shoulders. Every sunrise was a day lost, every sunset a reminder of the deadline. The fate of her family's dream rested entirely on her. She had to orchestrate a plot twist so profound it could rewrite their destiny. Failure meant more than just losing a building, it meant being humiliated, seeing her parents' life work turn to rubble. She clung to the hope that her kindness could be a weapon he'd never see coming. It's a funny thing, isn't it? How two completely different worlds are set on a collision course by destiny. On one side, you have this rich, powerful figure, a man used to getting everything he wants when he wants it. On the other, a young woman armed with nothing but recipes passed down through generations and an unshakable belief in people. This wasn't just a negotiation, it was a battle for the soul of a community, a heart-aching tale waiting to unfold. The stakes were astronomically high, and the outcome was anyone's guess. How do you even begin to reason with a man who sees your home as a mere stepping stone for his next grand project? The journey of overcoming this monumental obstacle would be fraught with challenges. Paisley knew she had to deliver a surprise so impactful it would resonate deep within his cold, corporate heart. She just didn't know how she was going to pull it off, bless her heart. The clock was officially ticking, a countdown to a confrontation that would leave one of them utterly shocked. 30 days to prove that warmth, community, and kindness were assets you couldn't list on the stock exchange. She had to change the mind of this ruthless man or lose everything. The stage was set for an emotional roller coaster, a story of redemption that no one, especially not the businessman himself, could have ever predicted. And it would all start with a single formal letter. That formal letter arrived on a Tuesday, cold and impersonal, a stark white ghost on the worn wooden counter. It was an eviction notice, of course. The name on the letterhead belonged to Connor Perry, the billionaire tycoon, the ruthless businessman himself. To him, the Roberts Bakery wasn't a place of memories and dreams, it was just a piece of property, collateral for his next multi-million-dollar high-rise. He saw bricks and mortar, not the heart-aching legacy baked into its very foundation. Paisley's pleas, her desperate phone calls to his office, fell on deaf ears. She spoke of her family, of the community, of everything they had built. But for Connor Perry, empathy was a foreign concept, a currency he didn't trade in. His world was one of cold, hard numbers, and the bakery was just a small, insignificant variable in a much larger, richer equation. This initial move was designed to show power, to signal that there was no room for emotional negotiation. He was a man who had built an empire by being completely detached, and this was no different. The fate of the small baker's daughter and her family was, to him, nothing more than a minor transaction. He couldn't have cared less about their story. The eviction notice wasn't just a legal document, it was a statement. A declaration that his ambition had no room for sentimentality. Overcoming this level of indifference seemed like an impossible task from the very start. The document felt like a death sentence for the life they knew. 30 days. The same 30 days Paisley had felt in her gut. Now the ultimatum wasn't hers to make, but his to enforce. Her family was being pushed out, their history dismissed with the stroke of a pen by a man they had never even met. This cold, calculated move was typical of the rich and powerful figure Paisley was now forced to confront in this unfolding drama. This act of pure, unadulterated business aggression was meant to crush their spirits, to make them fold before the fight even began. Connor Perry didn't expect a fight, he expected compliance. He was used to people crumbling when faced with his immense wealth and influence. He believed that everyone had a price, and that a small family bakery could certainly be bought, or, in this case, simply swept aside. A plot twist wasn't even a remote possibility in his mind. But he underestimated one thing: the resilience of a daughter fighting for her family's dream. He saw a baker's daughter, but he failed to see the fire in her eyes. Paisley Roberts knew she couldn't win by his rules, playing his game of money and power. She had to change the game entirely. So she did something he never expected. She decided to walk straight into the lion's den. Walking into Connor Perry's office was like stepping into another world. It was all glass, steel, and stark white minimalism, sterile, imposing space designed to make you feel small. And there he was, the billionaire himself, looking every bit the part of the ruthless businessman she'd imagined. He was sharp, intimidating, and radiated an aura of absolute control. Paisley, with flour still faintly dusting her jeans, felt terribly out of place, but she held her ground, her destiny hanging in the balance. She looked him dead in the eye, her voice steady despite the hammering in her chest. She didn't plead or beg. Instead, she made a proposal, an audacious ultimatum of her own. "Give me 30 days, she said. 30 days to show him the real value of her family's bakery, a value that couldn't be measured in square footage or profit projections. If, after that time, he still wanted it gone, they would leave without a fight. No lawyers, no protests, no more calls." Connor Perry was taken aback. Then, a slow, mocking smile spread across his face. He scoffed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. Who did this baker's daughter think she was? Bargaining with him? The sheer audacity was almost amusing. He was a rich man who could have had security escort her out in seconds. But something in her determined gaze, a flicker of defiance, intrigued him. This was a surprise, a tiny, unexpected disruption to his meticulously planned day. He leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen on his massive desk, the picture of a man thoroughly entertained. "Fine," he agreed, the word dripping with condescension. He saw it as a game, a 30-day distraction. In his mind, there was no way this girl could show him anything he hadn't already dismissed. He was doing it for the sport of it, to watch her try and fail. He expected her to be humiliated, to learn a harsh lesson about the real world. For Paisley, his agreement was a sliver of light in a very dark tunnel. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was a chance. She had managed to secure a battlefield of her own choosing. The emotional weight of the moment was immense, but she pushed it down. She had work to do. Her journey of overcoming this giant had officially begun, and she knew her first move had to be something personal, something from her world, not his. He watched her leave, a confident smirk still playing on his lips, already thinking about his next meeting. He gave the deal no further thought, convinced it was a waste of time. He had no idea that this simple agreement was the catalyst for a plot twist he could never have anticipated. He thought he was in control, but destiny had just been put into motion. Her first move would come the very next morning. The next morning, a simple, elegant white box appeared on Connor Purry's desk. There was no note, just the faint, sweet smell of cinnamon and sugar. Inside lay a half-dozen of the Roberts family's finest pastries, a heartening assortment of flaky croissants and decadent danishes. It was Paisley's opening move, a silent offering, a piece of her world delivered directly into his, a gesture of simple, honest kindness meant to convey more than words ever could. Connor stared at the box for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without even touching a single pastry, he buzzed for his assistant. "Get rid of this," he said, his voice flat and devoid of any emotion. He dismissed the gift as if it were trash, a cheap attempt to curry favor. For a ruthless businessman like him, such gestures were meaningless, just sentimental clutter in his highly efficient life. This was his way of reinforcing his cold exterior. The assistant, a young woman who looked like she secretly wanted to try one, simply nodded and moved the box. This small act of rejection was a clear message to Paisley, even if she wasn't there. To see it, it said, "Your world has no value in mine. Your kindness is not a currency I accept." It was a move designed to make her feel small, to show her that this billionaire was unmoved by her efforts, that her emotional appeals were pointless. But what Connor didn't bank on was Paisley's resilience. This wasn't just about pastries, it was about a promise. She was playing the long game. This initial rejection was something she had, on some level, expected. You don't try to change a man like Connor Perry with a single box of sweets. It was merely the first step in a much larger, more intricate plan. Her spirit of overcoming wasn't so easily broken. She knew this was a marathon, not a sprint. Connor, for his part, forgot about the incident almost immediately. He was already deep into a conference call about a multi-billion-dollar merger, his mind occupied with the kind of rich, high-stakes deals that defined his existence. A box of pastries from a baker's daughter? It didn't even register as a blip on his radar. He was completely unaware that this was the beginning of a daily ritual, a gentle siege on his fortified heart. He believed he had made his point, that he had shut down her silly little campaign before it even began. He was sure she would be humiliated by his cold dismissal and would soon give up. Little did he know, Paisley Roberts was just getting started. She wasn't just going to send food, she was going to bring the entire story of the bakery right to his doorstep, day after day. He was about to get an education he never signed up for. True to her word, Paisley didn't give up. The next day, she didn't just leave a box, she waited for him in the lobby. When Connor Perry swept past, she fell into step beside him, talking not about pastries, but about people. She pointed out the window towards the street and began her real mission. She started telling him the stories of the bakery, transforming it from a property into a living, breathing entity, a cornerstone of the community. She spoke of Mr. Henderson, an elderly widower who came in every single morning at 7 a.m. for a coffee and a chat, because the bakery was his only real social interaction of the day. She described the group of retired women who met every Wednesday, their laughter filling the small space. These weren't just customers, they were family. Her words painted a heartaching picture of a community hub, a place that held memories and provided comfort for so many loyal patrons. Connor, of course, remained outwardly unmoved, headless with a mask of bored indifference, occasionally glancing at his expensive watch. He saw her stories as a desperate, emotional tactic, an attempt to manipulate him with sentiment. This baker's daughter was persistent, he'd give her that. But in his mind, the fate of a few elderly customers couldn't possibly outweigh the economic benefits of a massive new development project. His profit-first mindset was a fortress. Day after day, she'd bring him a new story. She told him about the young couple who had their first date there, the kids who got a free cookie on their birthdays, the firefighters who stopped by for a moment of peace after a tough shift. Each story was a small, carefully placed stone, chipping away at the wall he had built around himself. She was showing him a different kind of wealth, one based on connection and kindness, not capital. Yet, he gave her nothing. Not a flicker of empathy, not a hint of understanding. He remained the cold, ruthless businessman he had always been. Or so it seemed. He wanted her to believe she was failing, that her efforts were entirely in vain. He thought that by showing no reaction, he could break her spirit and end this charade. The surprise he felt at her sheer tenacity was something he kept entirely to himself. But even a fortress as strong as Connor's couldn't be completely impenetrable. He was a master of hiding his true thoughts, of projecting an image of pure, cold logic. He let her think she was talking to a brick wall, but her words, her stories of selfless kindness, were starting to echo in the vast, empty halls of his mind. A tiny hairline crack was beginning to form in his resolve, though he would never, ever admit it. The turning point, the moment a real seed of doubt was planted, happened unexpectedly. One afternoon, Connor was leaving his building when he saw Paisley on the sidewalk. She wasn't waiting for him this time. Instead, she was talking to a homeless man, a familiar face in the neighborhood whom most people, including Connor, simply ignored. He paused, watching from a distance, his curiosity piqued. What was this baker's daughter up to now? He watched as Paisley listened intently to the man's story, her expression full of genuine compassion. Then, she did something that, for some reason, stopped Connor in his tracks. She reached into her own purse, pulled out what little cash she had, and handed it to the man, telling him to go get a proper, hot meal from the diner next door. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was a simple, selfless act of kindness, done when she thought no one was looking. For a man like Connor Perry, this was a foreign language. In his world, every action had a motive, a calculated return on investment. You gave something to get something. But this was pure, unadulterated decency. He, the great billionaire, had just witnessed a woman who was about to lose her livelihood give away her own money without a second thought. The stark contrast between her actions and his own profit-first mindset hit him with an unexpected jolt. He quickly ducked into his car before she could see him, a strange, unfamiliar feeling stirring in his chest. It was confusing. He had built his entire identity on being a ruthless businessman, on the belief that a certain level of selfishness was necessary for success. But Paisley's quiet act of generosity challenged that entire worldview. It was a heart-aching moment that he couldn't easily dismiss or categorize on a spreadsheet. It was purely emotional. This small, unnoticed event was a more powerful argument than any of the stories she had told him in his lobby. This was proof. It wasn't a tactic, it was who she was. The seed of doubt began to sprout. Was it possible that he was wrong? Could there be a type of wealth, a richness of character, that he had completely overlooked in his relentless pursuit of money and power? The thought was unsettling, an unwelcome intruder in his well-ordered mind. He tried to shake it off, to dismiss it as irrelevant. It was just one silly, sentimental act. But the image of her kindness lingered. He found himself replaying the scene over and over again in his head. The first real crack in his armor had appeared, not from a direct assault, but from a quiet act of grace. And it made him feel the need to push back, to test her, to see if this kindness was truly as unshakable as it seemed. The next day, armed with a new and unsettling feeling, Connor decided to test her. He wanted to see if he could break that serene composure, to prove to himself that her kindness had a limit. When Paisley approached him for their now daily meeting, he didn't even let her start. He cut her off with a deliberately cruel and condescending comment, a verbal jab designed to hurt and humiliate. "You know," he began, a smirk on his face, "I almost envy your simple life. It must be so quaint, not having to worry about anything important." He expected an outburst. He wanted tears, anger, frustration, some emotional reaction that would confirm his belief that everyone eventually cracks under pressure. He wanted to prove that her dignity was just a facade. But Paisley Roberts didn't give him the satisfaction. She simply absorbed the insult, her gaze unwavering. The surprise on her face was quickly replaced by a quiet strength that was far more powerful than any angry retort could have been. She took a breath and responded with a quiet dignity that completely disarmed him. "Mr. Perry," she said, her voice soft but firm, "you're right that my life is different from yours. But please don't mistake a simple life for a small one." She paused, letting the words hang in the air between them. "And you should know better than anyone that wealth and worth are not, and have never been, the same thing." It was a direct hit, delivered with grace, not aggression. Her words struck him with the force of a physical blow. He, the great Connor Perry, the billionaire tycoon, had just been effortlessly put in his place by a baker's daughter. She hadn't just deflected his attack, she had turned it back on him, exposing the hollowness of his own values. He was left speechless, a state he was not at all accustomed to. For the first time, he felt a pang of something that felt suspiciously like being humiliated. He abruptly ended the conversation and retreated to the safety of his office, the silence of the elevator ringing with her words, "Wealth and worth are not the same." It echoed in his mind, challenging the very foundation of his identity. He had spent his entire life accumulating wealth, believing it was the ultimate measure of a man. Her simple, profound statement suggested he might have been climbing the wrong ladder all along. This was a plot twist in his own self-perception. He sat at his desk, staring at the city skyline he was so proud of conquering, but he didn't see it. All he could see was her face, calm and resolute. All he could hear were her words. The test had backfired spectacularly. He had set out to crack her facade, but instead, he felt like she had just cracked his. And the most infuriating part? He couldn't shake the feeling that she was right. The days that followed were different. Connor Perry found himself in an unfamiliar state of distraction. During high-stakes board meetings, his mind would drift. He'd be looking at profit projections, but he'd see Paisley Roberts' genuine, heart-aching smile. He'd be negotiating a multi-million-dollar deal, but he'd hear her voice calmly stating that wealth and worth were not the same thing. Her presence lingered long after she left his building each day, an undeniable shift in his internal landscape. His stern facade, the one he had meticulously crafted over years, was beginning to crack, and it terrified him. He was the ruthless businessman, the cold-hearted tycoon. This emotional interference was unacceptable. It was inefficient. He tried to push the thoughts away, to bury them under mountains of work, but they kept resurfacing. Her simple kindness and unshakable dignity were proving to be more disruptive than any corporate takeover he had ever faced. He even found himself, much to his own annoyance, anticipating her daily visits. He'd glance at the clock, a small, unbidden flutter of something in his chest. He told himself it was just a morbid curiosity to see what silly story she'd come up with next, but deep down, a part of him knew it was more than that. Her presence had become a strange, bright spot in his sterile, predictable routine. A flicker of warmth in his cold, empty empire. This internal conflict was maddening. He was Connor Perry, a man who prided himself on logic and control. Yet here he was, being emotionally affected by a baker's daughter. It was illogical. It was a weakness. The surprise of his own reaction was a constant source of frustration. He was a rich man, a powerful man. He shouldn't be feeling this way. It was a battle within himself, his cold, cynical worldview clashing with this new emerging feeling. He started noticing small details about her he hadn't before. The way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear when she was making a passionate point. The genuine warmth in her eyes when she spoke of her customers. These observations were useless data points, yet his mind recorded them with perfect clarity. The journey of overcoming his own stubborn heart had begun, whether he was ready to admit it or not. But just as this subtle thaw was beginning, his old cynical instincts were about to be powerfully reawakened. He was on the verge of admitting, only to himself, that she might be different, that her kindness might be real. But a chance encounter he was about to witness would throw everything into question, threatening to ice over his heart once more. Perhaps for good. The fragile truce in Connor's mind was shattered one afternoon. He was looking out his office window when he saw her down on the street below. It was Paisley, but she wasn't alone. She was standing with Mark Renshaw, a rival developer, a man Connor knew all too well. Renshaw was a vulture, always circling, looking for an opportunity to undercut him. And there was Paisley talking to him, even laughing at something he said. Instantly, Connor's mind jumped to the worst possible conclusion. All the doubt, all the fledgling warmth he had started to feel, vanished in a hot flash of anger and betrayal. It was all a lie. Of course it was. This was the plot twist he should have seen coming. Her kindness, her heart-aching stories, her quiet dignity, it was all a manipulative tactic. A brilliant emotional performance designed to do one thing: drive up the price. She was playing him against Renshaw, trying to start a bidding war for her precious little bakery. He felt like a fool, a complete and utter idiot. He, the ruthless businessman who could read anyone, had been played by a simple baker's daughter. The feeling of being humiliated was sharp and bitter. His cynical worldview, which had been momentarily challenged, came roaring back with a vengeance. See, this is what happens when you let your guard down. Everyone has an angle. Kindness is just a mask for greed. He watched them for another minute, his jaw clenched. To him, the scene below confirmed everything he had ever believed about people. Paisley wasn't a saint. She was a savvy, ruthless operator in her own right, just with a much better act. The entire 30-day challenge was a sham, a clever negotiation strategy. The realization didn't just disappoint him, it made him furious. He had almost started to believe in her. The rich man's paranoia kicked in full force. Was she feeding Renshaw information? Were they laughing at how easily he had fallen for her act? The seeds of doubt Paisley had planted with her kindness were now choked out by weeds of suspicion. He felt a strange, unfamiliar pang in his chest that he couldn't quite identify. It was a mix of anger, hurt, and something that felt bizarrely like jealousy. He stormed away from the window, his mind made up. He wasn't going to be played for a fool any longer. This game was over. He was going to confront her, to call her out on her manipulative scheme. He would wipe that genuine-looking smile right off her face and put her back in her place. The brief, confusing chapter of his potential redemption was over. It was time for the cold, calculating Connor Perry to make a comeback. He didn't wait. He intercepted her in the lobby the moment she walked in the next day, his face a mask of cold fury. He didn't even give her a chance to say hello. "I saw you," he snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "I saw you with Renshaw. So tell me, was this whole heart-aching performance just for show? Was this all some kind of game to you? A tactic to drive up the price before you sell out to my competitor?" Paisley looked at him, utterly bewildered. The color drained from her face as his accusations hit her. She tried to speak, to explain, but he cut her off, his words dripping with venom. He accused her of being a liar, a manipulator, no better than the corporate sharks he dealt with every day. He threw her supposed kindness back in her face, twisting it into a weapon. He was intentionally trying to hurt her, to make her feel as foolish and humiliated as he did. But instead of the clever comeback or guilty confession he expected, he got something else entirely. Tears welled up in Paisley's eyes. Not crocodile tears, not tears of theatrical drama, but genuine, silent tears of profound disappointment and hurt. They traced paths down her cheeks as she stared at him, her expression one of disbelief. He had not only misread the situation, but he had also revealed a deep-seated cruelty she hadn't seen before. "He's my cousin," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "Mark grew up with me. He was telling me he's proud of me for standing up to you, and that he's sorry he can help because his company won't back him." The simple, devastating truth hung in the air between them. There was no scheme. There was no plot twist. There was only his own ugly, cynical assumption. The sight of her genuine tears made his stomach clench. He had been completely, horribly wrong. For the second time, this baker's daughter had left him speechless, but this time it was for a very different reason. The righteous anger drained out of him, replaced by a cold, creeping sense of shame. He had wanted to expose her, but all he had done was expose the ugly, distrustful nature of his own heart. Her emotional pain was a direct reflection of his own cynical worldview, and it was not a pretty sight. He watched her turn and walk away, her shoulders slumped in defeat. He had finally managed to break her spirit, but there was no victory in it. He just felt empty. He had taken her genuine kindness and trampled all over it. As he stood alone in the grand, sterile lobby, a profound question began to form in his mind. What kind of man have I become? It was a question he was suddenly desperate to find an answer to. That night, Connor Perry couldn't rest. The image of Paisley's tear-streaked face was burned into his memory. The shame was a physical weight, a stark contrast to the hollow pride he usually felt. Driven by a compulsion he didn't fully understand, he did something he hadn't done in years. He conducted his own research. He didn't delegate it to an assistant, he did it himself, typing Roberts Family Bakery into his search engine in the dead of night. He expected to find financial records, property deeds, the usual data points, but what he found instead was a story. He found old newspaper articles, faded photographs, and blog posts from local historians. He discovered that the bakery wasn't just a business, it was a local institution. And then he found the detail that made him pause, a piece of the legacy that Paisley had never even mentioned in her heart-aching appeals. The bakery hadn't been started by her parents or even her grandparents. It was founded in 1928 by her great-grandmother, Eleanor Roberts, a young widow with 3 children to feed during the Great Depression. She had started it with a single oven and a handful of family recipes, building it into a place of warmth and hope during one of the country's darkest times. This wasn't just a family business, it was a testament to overcoming incredible hardship. This new information added a layer of history and legacy he hadn't considered. He was a businessman who respected ambition and tenacity, and Eleanor Roberts' story was one of pure grit. He wasn't just trying to demolish a building, he was trying to erase a century-old story of female entrepreneurship and resilience. For the first time, he saw the bakery not as an asset on a map, but as a living piece of the city's history. This secret research felt clandestine. He was the ruthless tycoon, the man who dealt in futures, not pasts. Yet here he was, poring over the history of a family he was actively trying to displace. A strange sense of connection to their story began to form. He saw the through line, from the formidable great-grandmother to the quietly dignified baker's daughter who had stood up. To him, the same fire was in her eyes. He closed his laptop as the sun began to rise, his mind reeling. The conflict was no longer simple. It wasn't just about a high-rise anymore. It was about legacy, destiny, and the undeniable fact that he had been a complete and utter ass to the heir of that legacy. A profound shift was occurring within him, the true beginning of a redemption arc he never sought and couldn't yet explain, even to himself. The next day, Connor's guilt propelled him to act. He couldn't bring himself to face Paisley, not yet. The memory of her tears was too raw. So he did what a rich man like him does when faced with a problem he can't solve with words. He used his money. But this time, it wasn't for profit or power. Through his research, he had discovered that the Roberts family was struggling with a significant, looming debt to one of their suppliers, a debt that was causing them immense stress. Without a second thought, and through a series of anonymous channels, he paid it off, all of it. It was a simple wire transfer for him, a drop in the ocean of his vast fortune, but he knew it would be a lifeline for them. It was a protective act, a silent apology he couldn't yet voice. He told himself it was a practical business decision, a way to clear a potential obstacle, but he knew that was a lie. This was purely emotional. This act was the first step in his own quiet redemption. It was a gesture he couldn't explain, even to himself. Why was he suddenly protecting the interests of the very people he was supposed to be evicting? The ruthless businessman in him screamed that this was illogical, a foolish waste of capital. But another, quieter voice, one that sounded suspiciously like his conscience, told him it was the only right thing to do. He felt a strange satisfaction from the act, a warmth that no billion-dollar deal had ever given him. It was the feeling of using his immense power for something genuinely good, for an act of pure kindness. He had anonymously eased a burden for a family he had wronged. It was a secret between him and his bank account, a move that would have his board of directors completely shocked if they ever found out. He wondered what Paisley would think if she knew. Would she see it as a bribe? An attempt to buy her forgiveness? The thought troubled him. He realized with a jolt that he desperately wanted her to see it not as a transaction from a billionaire, but as a gesture from a man who was starting to change. A man who was beginning the long journey of overcoming his own worst instincts. This secret act of charity was a major plot twist in his own character arc. The man who saw everything as collateral was now secretly investing in the well-being of his adversary. He was still the powerful businessman on the outside, but on the inside, something fundamental had broken loose. He was starting to care. And that realization spurred him to do something even more out of character. He decided he needed to see the bakery for himself. A few days later, Connor did something he hadn't done in decades. He went incognito. Dressed in a simple pair of jeans, a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, he walked into the Roberts family bakery. The bell above the door chimed, a cheerful, welcoming sound so different from the sterile swoosh of his office doors. The air was thick with the smell of fresh bread and warm sugar, a comforting aroma that felt like a hug. It was a world away from his own. He took a seat at a small table in the corner, hiding behind a newspaper, and just watched. He saw Paisley Roberts in her element, and it was a revelation. She moved with an easy grace, greeting every customer by name, remembering their usual orders. She laughed with the group of elderly women, helped a young mother with her stroller, and slipped an extra cookie to a wide-eyed child. She was the sun around which this entire little community orbited. He saw the warmth, the genuine human connection that filled the room. It was a currency he had never traded in, a type of wealth he had never possessed. His empire was built on glass and steel, on hostile takeovers and ruthless negotiations. It was a rich but lonely kingdom. Here, in this humble little shop, was a different kind of imperione built on kindness, loyalty, and shared moments. It was a heart-aching ecosystem he had been blind to. He bought a coffee and a simple pastry, the kind he had instructed his assistant to throw away just weeks earlier. He took a bite, and the taste was extraordinary. It wasn't just the quality of the ingredients, it was something more. He felt absurdly that he could taste the history, the love, the legacy of the baker's daughter and her family in that single bite. The experience was deeply, unexpectedly emotional. As he sat there, unnoticed, he finally understood what Paisley had been trying to tell him. The bakery's value wasn't in the land it sat on, it was in the lives it touched. It was an anchor for people, a place of comfort and stability in a constantly changing world. To destroy it would be an act of vandalism, not progress. It would be a crime against a community he was only just beginning to see. He left the bakery. That day it changed man. The ruthless businessman was still there, but he was no longer in the driver's seat. Connor Perry had come facetto-face with a truth he could no longer ignore. His carefully constructed worldview had been shattered, not by a boardroom battle, but by a cup of coffee and the undeniable power of human kindness. The final days of the ultimatum were approaching, and he now knew a decision had to be made, a decision that went far beyond business. With only a couple of days left, Paisley requested one final meeting. This time, she didn't come with stories or pastries. She came with a final heartfelt appeal. She met him in his sterile office, the place where her audacious ultimatum had first been accepted. But her demeanor was different now. It wasn't just about fighting for her family's business anymore. It was about fighting for his soul. She didn't talk about profit margins, community impact, or historical value. She looked him straight in the eye, her gaze filled not with defiance, but with a surprising level of compassion. She spoke about him. "Mr. Perry," she began softly, "for 30 days I have tried to show you the value of my home. But today, I want to talk about yours." Her words caught him completely off guard. Another classic Paisley Roberts surprise. "You are building an empire of glass and steel," she continued, her voice resonating in the quiet room. "It's magnificent. It touches the clouds. You are one of the richest, most powerful men in the world. But I have to ask, isn't it lonely up there? You are building this vast, impressive kingdom, but it seems to me that you're living in an empty castle." The metaphor was so sharp, so accurate, it felt like a shard of glass in his own heart. Her words were not an accusation, but a gentle, heart-aching observation. She was holding up a mirror, and for the first time, he didn't flinch from the reflection. He saw the truth in what she was saying. He had countless houses but no home. He had thousands of employees but no real connections. His life was a monument to success, but it was a cold and solitary monument. Her kindness extended even to him, the man who had tried to ruin her. This was her final play, and it had nothing to do with business. It was about human connection. It was a plea for him to choose a different path, to find a different kind of wealth. It was the most profound business proposal he had ever received, and it had zero to do with money. It was an offer of redemption, a chance to start building an empire of the heart. The choice, she made clear, was his and his alone. She left without waiting for a response, her final appeal hanging in the air. Connor Perry sat alone in his vast office, the city lights twinkling below like a sea of diamonds. But for the first time, they seemed cold and distant. Paisley's words haunted him, echoing the emptiness he had long refused to acknowledge. The final day was tomorrow. A decision had to be made. And everything, absolutely everything, was about to change. The final day arrived. The 30th day. The air in the boardroom at Perry Industries was thick with anticipation. Connor's team of lawyers and architects were all assembled, their faces eager. On the massive screen at the front of the room were the final demolition plans for the Roberts bakery property. Blueprints for the new gleaming high-rise were laid out on the table. It was supposed to be a moment of triumph, the final step before breaking ground. The presentation began. His team spoke with crisp corporate enthusiasm about timelines, demolition schedules, and projected revenue streams. They pointed to charts and graphs showcasing the immense profit the new building would generate. They talked about it as if the bakery was already a ghost, a memory. They were celebrating the victory of a battle they all assumed their boss, the ruthless businessman, had already won. But Connor Perry was uncharacteristically silent. He sat at the head of the massive table, not looking at the screen, but staring out the window. His team's voices faded into a dull drone. He wasn't seeing blueprints or profit margins. He was seeing Paisley Roberts' face. He was hearing her final haunting words, her living in an empty castle. The memory of her kindness, her resilience. Her tears, it all came flooding back. His silence was unnerving. His team started to falter, their confident presentations tapering off into uncertain muttering. They kept glancing at him, waiting for his approval, for that sharp, decisive command he was so famous for. But it never came. He just sat there, lost in thought, a man at a crossroads. The entire empire he had built felt hollow in that moment. A kingdom of glass and steel, just as Shed said. Every instinct he had honed over a lifetime screamed at him to sign the papers, to give the order, to take the profit. It was the logical move. It was the Connor Perry move. But the memory of the warmth in the bakery, the taste of that simple pastry, the look of genuine disappointment in Paisley's eyes when he had hurt Harriet, was all stronger. This was the ultimate test of his dawning redemption. The lead architect finally finished his presentation, the silence in the room now deafening. "Sir, your approval?" he asked tentatively. All eyes were on Connor. The billionaire, the rich tycoon, the man who never hesitated, looked down at the demolition order on the table in front of him. His hand hovered over it. The fate of the bakery, and perhaps his own destiny, rested on this single moment. In that silent, tension-filled boardroom, Connor Perry finally moved. But he didn't reach for the pen to sign the order. Instead, he picked up the thick stack of papers, the eviction notice, the demolition plans, the culmination of his entire project. He held it in his hands for a beat, looking at his stunned team. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he tore the entire bundle in half, and then in half again. The sound of ripping paper was the only sound in the room. His entire board of directors just stared, their mouths agape. They were utterly shocked. This was not just unexpected, it was unthinkable. Connor Perry, the most ruthless businessman they knew, had just personally destroyed a project worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The room was frozen in a state of collective disbelief. What on earth was going on? This was a plot twist none of them could have possibly predicted. Connor stood up, dropping the torn scraps of paper into the wastebasket. "The plan has changed," he announced, his voice clear and firm, ringing with a newfound authority that had nothing to do with his wealth. "We are not destroying the bakery." He let that sink in before delivering the final stunning blow. "We are going to invest in it. I am going to become a silent partner, to help them expand, to ensure that place stands for another 100 years. A wave of murmurs and gasps swept through the room. This was madness. It made no financial sense. One of his board members finally found his voice. But why, Connor? It's a goldmine of a property. Connor turned to him, and for the first time in years, a genuine, warm smile touched his lips. It was a smile that reached his eyes, a smile that looked a lot like the one he had come to admire on a certain baker's daughter. Because, Connor said, his voice resonating with a deep, emotional truth, for the last 30 days, a young woman named Paisley Roberts has been giving me the most valuable business education of my life. He looked around at the faces of the rich, powerful men in the room. She showed me that the most valuable asset a business or a person can ever have isn't listed on the stock market. She showed me the value of a heart. The ultimatum was over. The journey of overcoming was complete. And in the end, it wasn't the billionaire who changed the baker's daughter. It was the baker's daughter who saved the ruthless businessman from his own empty gilded cage, proving that the most powerful love story is often one of kindness and unexpected redemption. And there you have it. What an incredible journey, wasn't it? We witnessed a man, Connor Perry, who started out as a ruthless businessman, a king in an empty castle of glass and steel, completely transform. He was a man who had the world at his feet, but was poorer than he could ever imagine. It took the quiet strength and unwavering kindness of a baker's daughter, Paisley Roberts, to show him that the greatest fortunes aren't measured in dollars, but in human connection and the richness of the heart. This story is a powerful reminder that no one is beyond redemption, and that a single act of kindness can start a ripple effect that changes everything. It's about having the courage to stand up for what you believe in, even when faced with impossible odds, and the wisdom to see the humanity in others, even when it's buried deep. It truly is a heart-aching story about overcoming not just external obstacles, but the walls we build around our own hearts. We would love to hear what you think. What part of this story impacted you the most? Was it Connor's final shocking decision in the boardroom? Or Paisley's quiet dignity in the face of cruelty? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Did you expect a different ending, or did you love the one we shared? Your perspective is part of what makes this community so special. If this story of destiny and redemption touched you, please give this video a like. It truly helps us share more stories like this with the world. Be sure to follow our channel so you never miss out on our next video. We have a library full of older videos with tales just as powerful as this one, so be sure to check them out. Thank you for spending this time with us, and we can't wait to see you in the next one.